What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, November 23rd, 2016, the day before Thanksgiving. And this will be our last live broadcast this week, as I've mentioned many, many times before. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. The lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 today. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's get right into it. A lot of people still thrashing over this story about how Donald Trump is not going to investigate Hillary Clinton, and one good example, of course, is from ActivistPost.com, talking about how the media outlets are reporting Trump will not attempt to prosecute Hillary Clinton, and basically saying, you know, what is going on here? It's clear that Hillary Clinton was guilty, and Trump is supposed to have a reputation for pursuing justice, so forth and so on. Now then, there has been a complication that showed up, and in hindsight, probably we should not be surprised. It turns out Donald Trump himself never said that. Audio transcripts of the actual interview with the New York Times prove the New York Times took some, shall we put it delicately, liberties. What Donald Trump actually said when he was asked if he was going to pursue criminal investigations against Hillary Clinton, he said, it's not a priority. And that's all he said. He didn't say no. He said it's not a priority. And the New York Times used that to run the headline, Donald Trump will not investigate Hillary Clinton. Then the rest of the corporate media ran on out to Trump's associates and aides and supporters to get their comments. And they were out there trying to defend that position, not knowing Trump hadn't actually said that. And then the corporate media had all these quotes from all of Trump's people about, oh, he's going to give Hillary time to heal and all the rest of it. And it turned out to be a complete bluff. The New York Times once again took liberties with what was actually said in order to generate the headlines they wanted. What Trump actually said is it's not a priority for his administration, and he's not seeking revenge. Now, that's a far cry away from saying we're going to let these people skate on criminal violations of the law that they've made. To nobody's surprise, following that, Donald Trump has now canceled his next interview with the New York Times. Each side is blaming the other, saying that they're being a spoil sport. What's wrong with those people? But remember, after that blistering criticism that Donald Trump ladled onto the corporate media, they came right on back, loaded for bear. They do not like him. Truth, accuracy, fairness, be gosh darned, we're going to get this man, no matter what. So the Hillary people, and obviously if Trump didn't really say that, then there was no deal being offered to give Hillary a get-out-of-jail-free card if she'd back off, and not too surprisingly, they haven't backed off. The protests are still going. And the Democrats are now back to saying that Trump and Russia rigged the U.S. election, and we've got to go back in and we've got to just, keep counting those ballots over and over and over again until Hillary gets the victory she so richly deserves. And they picked 3 specific states that Hillary assumed she was going to win, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and are out there saying, well, obviously somebody hacked into those voting machines and changed the outcome, and already that's blown up in their face because Michigan doesn't have electronic voting machines. They're all paper ballots. And I'm sure somebody from Hillary's team is going to be calling in to say, well, Putin was there with an eraser, and Trump was there with a pencil, and they were changing those ballots. And we are still hearing from parts of the country about how all of a sudden they're discovering boxes of votes that weren't counted on election night. Gee, we don't know how these got to be here in the closet, but we are going to have to count these as well. Already tried it in one state, still came up short. Trump is still the winner there. And now the same people that were demanding Donald Trump accept the results of the election are out there saying we need a recount of all the votes. And here is where there's a problem. There is no way of knowing whether the stored ballots in these states have been tampered with since the election. There's no safeguards whatsoever. Going back to that hacking democracy documentary on HBO, one of the things they showed was Bev Harris was going into one of these election centers where the ballots were supposed to be stored under seal, and she demonstrated the seals could be peeled right off and put back on. Now, the whole point of a seal is if it's opened, it's damaged in a way that you know the box has been tampered with. Whoever ordered these seals ordered them with adhesive that allowed them to be removed and put back on as many times as necessary. Now, over in the Electoral College, 6 Democratic crybabies have signed an agreement that they're going to block Donald Trump from securing the necessary 270 Electoral College votes to become president. And they're out there trying to convince the other electors, don't vote for Donald Trump, don't vote for Donald Trump. And here's why that's not going to work. The Republicans have been saying, well, maybe we could all vote for John Kasich as a compromise candidate. That's never going to work. You're never going to get all the electors to do that. You're not going to get the electors to give Hillary a majority. So all they can do with all of this game playing is throw the election into the House of Representatives, which is under the control of the Republicans. And all they're doing with all of this talk about Electoral College and protesting and all the stuff going on is they're making it very clear Hillary is still trying to gain the White House through fraud and deception and thuggery and screaming and crying and throwing tantrums. I was over at the supermarket earlier today doing some Thanksgiving shopping, and the Inquirer was up there with a whole slew of stories, one of which was the investigators into the email server scandal are out there saying that they were being blackmailed not to go any further. Now, at this point, if the Electoral College picks anyone other than Donald Trump on December 19th, the American people are not going to see it as a legitimate exercise of authority. They're going to see that the Electoral College knuckled under to the death threats or bribes or blackmail. If they keep this up, they're going to trigger a civil war. But I guess Hillary is the kind of individual where she doesn't care if 90% of the Americans get killed as long as the surviving 10% are her loyal slaves. So, we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network on this day before Thanksgiving. And we are, of course, again, for those who weren't here at the start of the show, we're taking the next 2 days off to give our control room crew some much-needed rest. We're going to take some much-needed rest. So we're back seeing these anti-Trump protesters. Article coming out of OneNewsNow.com. The anti-Trump college protesters are labeled as totally clueless. They're clearly radical socialists. And they're trying to organize these protests, not just to get Hillary installed as president, but demanding college campuses now become sanctuary zones to protect illegal immigrant students. They're still pushing that globalism agenda here. Story coming out of the Daily Ball, a video has been released proving the protesters that were protesting against Donald Trump in Chicago were bussed in from out of state. This is not a grassroots movement. This is being bought and paid for. A rent-a-ruckus. Now, on the lighter side of things, down in Tampa, Florida, there was a group of anti-Trump protesters marching down the street screaming, "We want whatever it is we're supposed to want. I didn't get my script when I got my paycheck." And they happened to pass by an Irish pub, which is a local hangout for Marines. And the Marines, of course, were very much supporters of Donald Trump. And they came on out and they gave those anti-Trump protesters a little bit of a hard time. The police had to be called to put a barrier to keep the Marines from mopping up the streets with these anti-Trump protesters. Another video came on out, anti-Trump crowd chanting, "What's better than 11 dead cops? 12 dead cops." And this gets back to something I was saying before when everybody was talking about this being the start of a color revolution. Any protest, any revolution, any group that seeks to change things anywhere cannot do so without the sympathy and support of the public. And apparently these anti-Trump protesters don't understand that. And they're out there committing vandalism, burning cars, beating people up, talking about killing cops. They're not presenting a sympathetic image. They're not going to get any public support for what their agenda is. At this point, they just seem to be scenery, leading to Hillary's attempt to corral the Electoral College or find some other skullduggery to get into the White House. Okay. I have to respond to something in the control room. Now then, getting on to Donald Trump and what he's doing. At this point, it is prudent to ignore all the proclamations about who Donald Trump might pick or is considering picking for this or that position in his administration, because most of those have turned out to be flat out wrong, wishful thinking. In many cases, they're basically media campaigns by people who want those jobs and hope to create a surge of support so that Trump will say, wow, everybody seems to think that, having Mitt Romney as Secretary of State would be a great thing, so let's give him a consider. And obviously, I disagree with that. Apparently, Donald Trump is actually considering Hawaii's own Tulsi Gabbard as Secretary of State. And she is very pro-peace. She does not like the idea of wars and interventions and all the rest of that stuff. So that would be a good thing. Meanwhile, actually, he's named his new Secretary of Education. Claire's going to have that in her segment of the show. Now, down at the Southern Poverty Law Center, they have come out with an observation that Donald Trump's expression, drain the swamp, is somehow racist. And I'm not sure exactly how they're getting there. Of course, the SPLC and the ADL were saying, Make America Great was racist. So they're just out there flapping their gums and trying to get things done. Oh, the tantrum crowd is finally showing up here. Now, Obama, this being his last weeks in office, is doing things presidents do in their last week of office. He's now commuted the sentences of more criminals, mostly drug criminals, than the last 11 presidents combined. He's just letting them out of jail here. And he did a point of handing out the Medals of Freedom. Now, the Medals of Freedom are something that's considered the nation's highest civilian award. It's not awarded to the military. It is awarded to civilians who are not entitled to military decorations, so they came up with the Medal of Freedom. And Obama was giving his out. He gave out a whole batch of them to the celebrities who were bashing Donald Trump. Robert De Niro got one, Bruce Springsteen, Ellen DeGeneres, Tom Hanks. They were all out there screaming how bad Donald Trump was, and now they've got the Medal of Freedom. And so, like the Nobel Peace Prize, Obama has just discredited the Freedom Medal. It doesn't mean anything anymore. It's a jelly donut given out to favorite supporters. Now, over in Europe, they're starting to look into the situation with the Clinton Foundation. And some of these countries are actually mounting their own investigations about their side of the transaction. And apparently there was a concern coming out of Bern. The Swiss government held an investigation, and as is typical of most government investigations, concluded there wasn't a conflict of interest that we can find, and therefore we're not going to do anything about it. But it has caused a stir. And by the way, donations to the Clinton Foundation from foreign governments have pretty much at this point dried up. Now, getting onto the propaganda war, and that's exactly what it is. The European Union Parliament has approved a resolution to counter Russian media propaganda without, of course, documenting why any of it is propaganda. And Russia responded by saying that this kind of a move points to a degrading democracy, and reminding everybody that Russia does not discriminate against Western media when they come to Russia or any of its territories. But there is a war on non-official speech in this country. Over at Bloomberg, who, by the way, is one of the corporate media outlets that was bashing Trump, supporting Hillary, told you Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, Bloomberg actually has an article saying that it's time to revise the First Amendment because fake news shouldn't be given protected speech status. with, of course, the corporate media and the government deciding what is or is not fake. This is a war on the First Amendment right now. Now, Breitbart News has been blacklisted by an ad tech company, supposedly for violating their hate speech rules. This is something we're seeing with all the large online advertisers, is they're severing their relations with any websites that are not towing the liberal, socialist, pro-Hillary line and try and bankrupt us. Fortunately, in our case, Google never advertised on us, so it's no big loss. And we continue to survive due to the generosity of our donors who've been very, very good in supporting us. But that's what's going on. Now, over at Reason.com, there's a very interesting article. And it's headlined, "The Fake Epidemic of Fake News." And the slug line is, "The outrage over fake news is based on fake news about fake news." And they go on in and they do an analysis of the examples that have been held up by the corporate media to show what a danger and a threat fake news has become. And they basically tear it apart, showing that the corporate media is cherry-picking stories from websites that are a little bit less responsible than the major players in the independent media, and then showcasing them and say, see, this is what they're all about. That's like reporting on a black man stealing a car and using it to declare all black people are car thieves, which wouldn't go very far. But they're out there trying to sell the American people on this idea that the American people should only listen to what the government and corporations tell them, and certainly not listen to anything coming from a foreign government or anybody who's not in the employ of the current U.S. government or corporations. But I think the world has a somewhat different view, because an official in the Japanese government has come on out saying that there's no point in making policy based on anything in the American corporate media because they are always wrong. So we're already starting to see the entire world shunning the American corporate media as being untrustworthy and unreliable. And I would remind you all again of that story we had earlier in the program, where it turns out Donald Trump did not in fact say he was not going to have criminal investigations of Hillary Clinton. What he actually said in a New York Times interview was, "It's not a priority and I'm not seeking revenge." And the New York Times wrote the headline, "Donald Trump will not investigate Hillary Clinton." Everybody else ran with it. Boy, talk about fake news. It really is absurd. Now, turning into the war zones. Oh, and by the way, we're going to be kind of loosey-goosey on the phone calls today, and if you've got something you want to be thankful for, tomorrow being Thanksgiving, call on in with that. I'm certainly thankful that at least so far we have prevented Hillary Clinton from stealing that White House. Obviously, though, that game is still very much afoot. Now, turning to the war zones, 4 more Syrian settlements have now signed reconciliation agreements with Damascus. More and more, Syria is coming back under the control of the Syrian government, and bit by bit, the U.S.-backed terrorists are being forced out. The U.S. is losing Syria as badly as they lost Vietnam, and that's something Obama didn't want on his legacy. We had that writer came out the other day saying that Obama dearly wanted a victory in Syria to go out of office on. Meanwhile, we're still seeing these demands by the U.S. government that Syria create autonomous zones for people to live in, basically forming little tiny countries and breaking up Syria that way. And, of course, Damascus is saying, no, we are Syria. We're not going to have autonomous areas. What do you think Washington, D.C.'s reaction would be if somebody came on in and said, well, we think there should be autonomous zones inside the United States where the federal government no longer has any authority? All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we are getting reports that NATO is now training the Ukrainian army in how to commit sabotage. Remember, some Ukrainians snuck into Crimea and kidnapped 2 Russian soldiers. They're going to be put on show trials, trying to provoke Putin, trying to get the war going before Donald Trump can get into the White House. And it's a very, very intense situation. Now, Kiev is threatening to cut off the water supply to the Lugansk People's Republic starting December 1st. This constitutes a war crime, collective punishment. But that's what they're doing, trying to keep their New World Order global government thing going. It's falling apart around them. Over in South Korea, authorities have raided Samsung, apparently as part of the investigation into allegations of corruption by the president. And basically there's an individual, Park Gyun-hee, pressured the fund to support a Samsung merger. And supposedly in return, Samsung is alleged to have given financial favors to Ms. Park's confidant, Choi Soon-sil. So corruption is running rampant all over the globe. In some countries, it's sort of accepted and tolerated. I don't think it should be anywhere. Now, more and more people are looking at France's upcoming election and coming to terms with the fact that it looks like Marine Le Pen is poised to win, which will be Europe's next big political earthquake. Following Brexit and Donald Trump's victory, it seems like the careful, planned operation of the globalists is starting to fray at the edge, because Marine Le Pen is very much not on board with the EU. Is already talking about having a referendum for a Frexit, should she become president. Now, up in Norway, their third largest city, Trondheim, has now voted to boycott all goods and services produced in the illegal Israeli settlements located in the occupied Palestinian territories. We can expect a horrible Palestinian terror attack in Trondheim in 5, 4, 3, 2, well, soon. Soon here. Okay. All right, we're going to start grabbing some phone calls here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yep, Russia continues buying gold. Turkey's going to go to the Shanghai Co-op, buy the S-400. So you see that as we are fiddling while Rome/neoliberalism is burning, they're moving away, The world is, half the world's moving away from this neoliberal.
It's not just the neoliberalism, socialism. They're seeing the United States as an empire in decay and decline, and they're trying to de-link from it. They don't want to get dragged down with it when it collapses.
It just makes it we're in like a really dangerous situation right now, Mike.
We are.
You can see how they're antagonizing the Russians still. They're just not going to let up, because this is their whole belief system. They're willing to do anything now. Especially look at the protests. They're not going to stop doing the protests, Mike. They'll block traffic, block commerce. They're going to go all full in, Mike, because there's no other way for them now.
Yeah, but it's counterproductive, because these protesters are not presenting a sympathetic public image. They're not going to win public support for their agenda by having a bunch of hired thugs run on out and commit violence in the streets. They're going to alienate the public from their cause. I mean, imagine during the American Revolution if George Washington and Thomas Jefferson had gone into schools and started shooting children. Do you think they would have had the public support necessary for the American Revolution? Of course not.
They don't care, though, because they're just going to cause enough anarchy to stop things. And if that don't work, they'll try to kill Trump. And if that don't work, who knows what else they'll do? Start a war with Russia. They're on their last leg, especially with Marie Le Pen. When France or Germany goes, the EU is gone, Mike. It's just going to fall apart.
Absolutely, I agree. It's already falling apart here. And do you have more to say? Because we got to take a commercial break. Do you want to hold over?
That's it, Mike.
Okay, then
No, that's it.
All right, we're going to let you go here. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go back to the phones here, just another mention about the so-called fake news and this propaganda war against Russia. As you know, this list of fake news websites that was put together by this liberal feminist Hillary-supporting professor with 0 qualifications, and she basically got the list from another website. That one kind of fizzled because there was no backing for it at all. There's a new one out now there, a list of the propaganda websites that are confirmed spewing Russian propaganda, and I'm glad to say that What Really Happened made the team. I'm going to get a little chenille letter and a Letterman's jacket and the rest of it. Okay, we're going to go back to the telephones now. Tim in Wyoming, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it. Now, I wanted to mention, you were just talking about the Medal of Freedom.
Yes.
I happened to catch a little bit of that on C-SPAN, unfortunately, for me having to see Obama's face there. But when I saw the smug expression on his face, it just made me want to throw something through the television. It really did.
Mm-hmm.
It was sickening to see. And the people and the statements that were being made about people that were being given that medal, which it was Ronald Reagan who invented that, unless I'm mistaken. He was the one who decided for the idea of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And I think that until at the end of Carter, maybe, or the end of, no, I guess it might have been. Yeah, it might have been the end of, no, not Carter. I can't remember. Anyway, I think it was either might have been the next president, and then it started falling off as far as the quality of the people that were receiving that.
Yes.
I know Louis L'Amour was given one. Actually, I think Ronald Reagan himself gave one to Louis L'Amour.
Well, here's my question. Here's my question, okay? What have any of these people, Robert De Niro, Tom Hanks, Ellen DeGeneres, and the rest of them, what did they do that actually increased freedom in this country? That's the question I want to ask.
Oh, well, obviously we know the answer to the question. Unless we take the filmography of some of these people, we take their collected spewage of whatever you want to call it. We collect that together and maybe winnow out the chaff. We might end up with 10% of that being decent. But, some of those people, I mean, for Bill and Melinda Gates to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom, when all they're doing is promoting globalism, abortion, and forced vaccinations around the world, that's sickening. It's sick.
I agree.
But the expression I hate to even call the person in the White House right now the president, but that is the title that we've given him.
Mm-hmm.
But for us to say to that person, we believe that you're correct in giving this to them, it's just, anybody who thinks that that's true is messed up in the head. But I want to say that about that. But then you talk about the fake news. Now, you're aware of who Larry Klayman is, right?
Oh, yes, very much so.
Okay, Larry Klayman's website is considered to be fake news by Google. I receive his email alerts. I mean, he sends out a plethora of letters. He sends out multiple letters a day, it seems like. It seems like that's all he does is sit and write letters and files lawsuits, which I'm happy that he's doing that. He says, when Google sends me something which has a question mark as far as the address, and it says, we don't know if this is really from him or from someone else, and we can't determine, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, 2 weeks ago or 2.5 or 3 weeks ago, it was perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with it. It was, you were sending it out just fine just then. Actually, probably pre-October 1st, I should say.
Well, for the members of our audience who don't know who we're talking about, Larry Klayman is a lawyer. He works in the public interest. He was founder of Judicial Watch, which has just done amazing work throughout the years exposing government corruption. Larry's gone his own ways down in Florida. He actually had an ironclad RICO lawsuit ready to go against the Clinton Foundation. Unfortunately, had the bad luck to have the case assigned to a Clinton-appointed judge who threw it out of court without even considering its merits. But that's who Larry Klayman is, and he's got a sterling reputation, for just being serious about exposing corruption in our government. And I'm not surprised Google is now declaring him to be fake news because they're trying to protect the corrupt.
Right. Well, that was basically what I wanted to say about that, because I think that anybody who if anybody reads the things that he sends out, I mean, if you're familiar with the history, obviously, ahead of time, but if you're reading the things that he sends out and he lays it out directly, says this is the lawsuit I'm filing and these are the facts in the case, and how can anybody find anyone innocent with the facts that he lays out, is what I'm trying to say.
He makes a very good case. He's never gone to court without a case that was basically, rock solid. He's not a reckless, careless person.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
That's okay.
I was going to say, that when he tried to have papers served on the immediate past Attorney General and the present Attorney General, and also the President and the candidate, the presumed dictatress, if you will, of the country, along with her husband, they denied. They basically stood. It's almost as though they slam the door in the face of the person serving the papers and pretend the person never existed. And that's what I read was that's essentially what had happened, was that they pretended as though they were never served.
Yeah.
And they've been served. So, I mean, he says he'll continue to fight for the American public, and I hope that that's the case, because if the American public, okay, before I go on about the public's intelligence or lack of, the American public is mostly fed propaganda, as we all know, and if there's even 5% of truth in the news broadcast, it's still skewed, no matter how we look at it. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for taking my call. Have a good Thanksgiving.
Same to you. Thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Ed in Michigan. Aloha, Ed. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I think there's a little bit of a time delay going on here. But the last caller, I had 3 other topics. First off, Trey Gowdy, I was wondering, what do you think he's going to be doing for the next 5 years?
Well, he's going to be doing what he has been doing for the last year until his next reelection, and assuming that he's not ganged up on to drive him out of Congress the way they did Cynthia McKinney, he's going to be a major thorn in the Clinton side along with Chaffetz, because they're both out there saying they're going to continue their investigations. And now we know that this claim by the New York Times that Trump was going to drop all investigations into Hillary Clinton was manufactured to be the absolute most generous. They misquoted Donald Trump to be a little bit more pragmatic. They basically cherry-picked what he said in order to justify a headline that they were going to put on out there to help destroy Trump's popular support, because a lot of Trump's popular support was coming from people who want the Clintons held to account for their crimes and corruptions. And, if they are getting ready to do some kind of a Hail Mary pass at the Electoral College, the big task between now and then is to make Trump look like really bad and Hillary look really good, so that the American people will say, well, okay, I guess the Electoral College had the best thing in mind. It's not working, again, because all of these anti-Trump protesters are just, they're coming across in the media as thugs. They're trying to limit video coverage now, and we're just being told what wonderful people they are by the corporate media. But anybody who's there with a camcorder, who isn't being beaten up, by the way, is showing these people for what they really are. And they're not presenting a sympathetic public image.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He's like you. He knows all the right questions to ask. Okay, that's all I got there. Mike, now I know some very, very well-educated people, actually family, and we talked about the Trump-Clinton thing this summer, and they were like, I don't know anybody that's going to vote for Trump. And these are, well-educated people, MSU graduates from, living out in Seattle type.
Well, they're all the liberal the liberal bastions in you know, I mean, Hillary did very well in those urban cities and liberal universities and everything. The rest of the country went for Donald Trump. And I got to tell you, I'm already wondering how many of tomorrow's Thanksgiving dinners are going to turn into food fights because of this rancorous election.
Right.
Oh my God, there's giblets everywhere.
The last caller. Now, you can have a rock solid case, but if you don't bring it in front of the court under the conditions, we talked about this before, if it's not brought in front of the court, and if you say the wrong thing, they can throw it out. And I'm thinking that's what happened in the Larry Klayman.
Oh, there's no question. The judge that he was assigned, supposedly at random, was appointed by President Bill Clinton, and just ejected the case right then and there. Didn't even look at the merits. Larry Klayman never even got a chance to present his case. I don't know if he's going to try and refile it in a different venue. But we know our entire system is corrupt from top to bottom. When you look at how corrupt the Clintons are, do you think they appointed anybody to the bench or offices or U.S. attorneys who were not equally as corrupt?
But Mike, if it's not, if they see words like back in the Latin language and stuff like that, if words are brought wrongly in front of the court, it makes a total difference in the way the case is going to be handled.
Well, there's a few Latin phrases that get used around, but, you know, our courts do their business in English, which is the language of the land here. But again, in this Larry Klayman case, the RICO case against the Clinton Foundation, the judge didn't read the case. He just said no and threw it out. That's it. Anyway, Ed, got to let you go.
Okay.
You had one more topic about John F. Kennedy?
Oh, yeah.
But real quick. Okay, I guess we lost the connection. Okay, so we're going to switch from Ed. Thank you, Ed. We're going to switch to Tony in Dallas. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Hey, thanks for taking my call. I've been listening to you, actually listening to RBN for about a good 6 to 7 years. I think you maybe left once or twice. But I'm glad you're back. Usually listen to you guys overnight as I drive, but I said, you know what, I'm going to have to get in on this conversation, get up out of bed and get on this conversation. But this thing about the fake news, you know, have you heard of the National Enquirer? If that ain't fake.
Well, National Enquirer used to be fake. They were down on the level of the Midnight Sun. But about 18 years ago, I think, they ran a story about Carol Burnett. And up until that point, most celebrities, when they were written about in the Enquirer as doing something they hadn't done, they kind of shrugged it off, and the attitude is even bad publicity is better than no publicity at all. But Carol Burnett sued and for defamation, and she won. And ever since then, even though the National Enquirer still has its audience in the sleaze and the scandal and all the rest of it, they actually have gained a reputation for fact-checking their stories because they don't want to get sued again. So even though their public image is definitely that of a yellow journal, generally the facts that are presented in there do check out.
Okay. Well, hey, I love Carol Burnett. I grew up with her, and I do stand corrected.
Yeah, well, she's a wonderful lady. I had the pleasure of meeting her when I worked at CBS Television City, and she is every bit as nice in private as she comes across in public.
All right, Mike, that's all I have.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and get back to the news. Let's turn to the economic news. One of our callers before had mentioned this briefly. Russia is on a gold-buying spree, and they spent more in October, the most they've spent for gold purchases since 1998. They are just grabbing gold as fast as they can because they know what is coming with the paper computer currencies out there. We're hearing sort of rumblings around the COMEX that they are running dangerously close to default. And they're out there saying that, no, we're not going to default for the deliveries that are due in December, but the numbers are getting very, very close, and they're getting very, very nervous. And it is a reminder that if you are going to invest in precious metals, and it's a really good idea, especially as the war on cash escalates, you want the physical metal under your own control, because the paper gold is leveraged hundreds to one. That means that for every 1 ounce of real deliverable gold, there are paper contracts for a couple of hundred ounces. When the gold run actually happens, most of those paper contracts are going to be utterly worthless. You know, you can frame them, hang them on a wall as a reminder not to be so stupid next time around. But it's all paper illusion. Now, getting back to the war on cash, there's an article over in Patriot Rising pointing out what everybody already knew. For non-bankers, the war on cash is a disaster. Over in India, where they've really started pushing forward with the war on cash, and you're only allowed to have little tiny small denomination stuff in your pocket and everything else has to be in the bank, it almost locked up the entire economy. But the goal of the war on cash, it's being sold to you that we're gonna stop the drug trade and we're gonna stop money laundering and black market. Nonsense. The money launderers have already figured out another way to game the system. Everything that was going in and out of the Clinton Foundation or the place down in Panama was being sent in and out electronically. They're not actually carrying bags of cash. They already know how to game the system. This is about forcing us to be dependent on the banks to hold our money, just like we're being forced to be dependent on the cloud to hold our data, to keep us under control, to prevent a run on the bank. Because when the banks start to collapse, and they will, you're going to run up there and say, give me my money, and the banker's going to say, we can't, there's no cash anymore. You have to leave it in one of our banks. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones. Steve in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, I'd just like to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving. Have a very safe and wonderful holiday, okay? I'd like to talk about the cashless society. It's never going to happen because the powers that be can't sell their dope, their heroin, their meth, their cocaine, and other pills on the side unless they have cash. And that's just the way it is.
Well, obviously, that's a factor that's working against the cashless society, but, obviously they're not in agreement. The bankers, who, yes, they're laundering drug money, are looking at the reality that if there's a major hiccup, people are going to be banging on the doors and wanting the cash out of their savings accounts, and it's not going to be there. So one advantage of the cashless society is you can't take your money out of the bank. It is locked in there, and if the bank collapses, you lose everything. And by the way, the laws have been changed to make that legal. The Congress, I think it was 2 years ago, passed a law that legally redefined a bank savings account holder as an unsecured investor in the bank, meaning the bank can now drop its losses on the savings accounts holders, and they can't do a thing about it. And if you have a cashless society and the bank starts dipping into your savings account, you can't close the savings account except to transfer it to another bank. And if they're in trouble, they're going to dip into it. And again, it's this enforced dependency. We're being forced to depend on the banks to hold our money for us. We're being forced on the cloud to hold our data. And that enforced dependency is a system of enslavement.
Yeah, and that's absolute. But here's another thing that may be a little weird on the side on this. A lot of these religious people talk about the cashless society has the mark of the beast and whatnot and stuff, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to make something completely clear, okay? The mark of the beast is already here. It's called 501c3 churches, okay? You can go anywhere with that you want, all right? But there's always going to be cash, one way or the other.
People will just invent their own. People will invent their own.
That's right.
There was a story.
I've already done that. I barter all the time. I pay as very little as I can for anything, but I'll do services for other goods that I need, and it works very fine, although I still do have to earn money, unfortunately.
Yeah, you do here. The government is actually trying to outlaw barter because they can't tax it. There was even an attempt to ban yard sales because that was commerce taking place that wasn't paying sales tax.
That's never going to work, especially where I live. If you were to live in my area, it would never work.
Well, same here. There's an enforcement problem. There's an enforcement problem. Steve, got to let you go. Got to do a station identification.
All right.
Back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we go back to the phones, I got to hit a couple of news stories. Now, everybody was talking about, Hillary's screaming Russia hacked the elections, and they're portraying Hillary as a sore loser. Desperation on the cusp of madness. So now they're trying to take the focus off of Hillary asking for a recount, and they persuaded Jill Stein, the candidate from the Green Party, to file for recounts in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Now, let's be very honest, Jill Stein has no hope whatsoever of gaining anything from the recounts because she was that far behind the two major candidates. And she's going to have to raise money to pay for the recounts. So this may be a non-starter to begin with. But it shows the degree of desperation in that narcocracy that they want to hold on to power. By any means, fair or foul, emphasis on the foul. A couple more stories from the economy, then we're going to go back to the phones here. A judge has now blocked Obama's rule extending overtime pay to 4.2 million U.S. workers. And this was one of the things that I agreed with Obama on. And I cannot comprehend the thinking we have seen come out of the nation's economic managers. Because if you are not paying your workers decent wages and salaries, they are not going to be going down to those shopping malls and buying things. And the word is now that turnout for Black Friday is expected to be unusually low. And the retailers are panicking. Why aren't they coming in here? They don't have any money. If you want them to come on in and buy your products, you have to make sure they've got the money to do it with. Oh, no. We've got credit cards. We'll take the credit cards from them. These people don't want to be in debt anymore. The system is breaking down. And until it is rebalanced and ordinary people able, once again, to earn a decent living, this economy cannot work. Having all the money up at the very, very top is not a functioning economy. Now, Donald Trump wants to bring manufacturing back to this country. I absolutely agree. We need to bring these high-paying jobs back for Americans to have so that they can go to the shopping malls and buy stuff. Pay their mortgages, buy new cars, take care of their kids. There's another reason to bring the manufacturing back here as well. And that's to basically return to having quality products we can buy at the stores. Because the importers, for the big box stores, they get whatever they can get at the lowest cost to maximize their profits. And it's why you will buy things at the big box stores that will break apart almost the day the warranty expires. There's also been a huge problem with pirated goods and worse, defective pirated parts. It's actually a big problem in the airline industry. Counterfeit parts for airplanes that don't match the factory specifications. They can kill people with that. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Nash in Chicago. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, happy Thanksgiving to you and Claire, and thanks for all the hard work and information you provide.
Thank you for the kind words.
I got 3 quick questions on the Federal Reserve Bank.
Sure.
I believe I heard you say this, correct me if I'm wrong. 1, that it's a Ponzi scheme. 2, that it's privately owned. And 3, I think you said that interest paid back has to be paid in gold. Is that all correct?
That's exactly right. All 3 of those are correct. The Federal Reserve, the concept of the debt-based currency itself is a pyramid scheme. It only works as long as they can continually find new, larger populations of borrowers to allow the creation of new money, much of which is siphoned off to pay the interest on the old money. But when they run out of new borrowers, the system is going to collapse. History has shown it many times that that's going to happen. Now, up until recently, when a nation enslaved to a private central bank collapses, all the other nations enslaved to private central banks will step in, recapitalize, and restart the system again. And they've been playing this scam on the human race for about 300 years now.
Okay, Mike, if all that's true, that means that all the money that exists here, if we gave it back to them, it would no way come close to paying the principal, and all the gold would still not pay it all back. So therefore, whoever owns the Federal Reserve Bank owns everything in this country. Who owns the Federal Reserve Bank is my question now.
It's owned by several...
They own it all.
It's owned by several families, the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, the Rockefellers, I think, have an interest in it as well. It's about 5 or 6 of these hereditary banking clans that have brought this nation into a status of debt slavery. Now, getting on to your question number 2, yes, the Federal Reserve is privately owned, and it's in business for its own enrichment. They called it the Federal Reserve because the original plan was to call it the Third Bank of the United States, but anybody who understood history realized what an unmitigated disaster the first and second banks of the United States had been. So in order to cloak the bank in a quasi-governmental shroud, if you will, they called it the Federal Reserve, but it's no more federal than Federal Express. And yes, there's a little handshake relationship with the government regarding selection of the chairman, but that's really for public display. It's a token control at best. I would agree, if Donald Trump wanted to take direct control of the Federal Reserve the way Putin took direct control of Russia's central bank, I would be fully on board with that move. But the Federal Reserve is privately owned, and it's not here to serve the public. It's not here to serve the country. It's there to serve itself and turn a profit from this hoax of creating money out of thin air and then lending it to us at interest. And we have to pay back that money and interest with our labor. It's a system of enslavement. And most people don't realize that it is a system of enslavement. As you say, they own everything, they run everything. Remember what Rothschild, the founding Rothschild said, give me control of a nation's currency and I care not who makes the laws. It's a form of governance, and it's no more legitimate than rule by divine right or rule by slavery. And like those former systems, it only works if the public is brainwashed into believing this is the way life is supposed to be. And more people are becoming private central bank heretics.
That's incredible. Okay, Mike, thank you. And you and Claire, have a nice Thanksgiving. How's the weather in Hawaii? It's cold there in Chicago.
Well, it's cloudy, a little bit of rain, very, very windy, but it's Hawaii and it is November, so that's the way it is. All right, thanks an awful lot.
Michael, enjoy the holiday.
We certainly will. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who have just rejoined our network. And moving on down the phone lines, Elizabeth in Connecticut. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Elizabeth?
Been listening to you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Been listening to you since about 2005. You're great. Here I am doing Thanksgiving dinner preparations and listening to one of my favorite radio shows. Actually, what I want to say really harkens back to the previous caller because he was talking about the Federal Reserve, and I wanted to talk about these global elites and also about the alt-right. I started paying attention to the alt-right about 2 years ago when I came across a video called With Open Gates. I told you about it before. That just pretty much was a documentary on the flooding of Europe of Syrians and Africans. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, there's no room for, Europeans. They need to have their own land. And then I just came across a documentary, actually these two Western guys, one I think he was Australian and one was American, who moved to China and married two Chinese girls. They've been there for like a decade, but they cannot work. Once you marry, if you're not Chinese, you cannot work in China. So, it's only in Western countries that we're forced this multiculturalism. And it's not, right now CNN and they're all spouting white supremacy. I've watched these people. They're not supremacists. They're talking about the ethno-state, just like Israel has an ethno-state or China has an ethno-state. And, America was like that pretty much 90% until 1965 and the Art-Celler Act was pushed. And then I just wanted to ask you, have you ever read the Talmud?
I've read portions of it as part of my research. I haven't read the whole thing though. Can I back up here?
Well, I've read.
Can I back up on something here on this white issue? First of all, if you're getting ready to cook your turkey for Thanksgiving, my little helpful hint is in the stuffing you add a 1/4 cup of popcorn, and then you put the turkey in the oven, and when it blows its rear end off, it's done. Okay, that's my helpful household hint for Thanksgiving Day. Now then, I'm looking here at some screenshots that were taken of Wikipedia. This is Wikipedia's definitions for the following terms. Black pride, their definition. Black pride is a movement encouraging people to take pride in being black. Okay, then we move on to gay pride. Gay pride, or LGBT pride, is the positive stance against discrimination and violence toward lesbians, gays, bisexual, and transgender people to promote their self-affirmation. Next one, Asian pride. Asian pride is a positive stance to being Asian American. Then you go down to white pride. White pride is a slogan primarily used by white separatists, white nationalists, neo-Nazi, and white supremacist organizations to signal their racist viewpoints. Can you say bias here? I mean, we have all these other. We have all these groups like, blacks are told to be proud that they're black, and Asians be proud you're Asian, and gay be proud that you're gay. And I don't have a problem with any of that. My problem is when white people want to be proud for being right, they're screaming, you're a racist, you're an enslaver, you're a plantation owner. And I get really sick and tired of that, especially when you consider my ancestors ran a station on the Underground Railroad helping escaped slaves get to Canada. So stop screaming at me that I'm the descendant of slave owners, because I'm not. Anyway.
Yeah, and also we're not the only culture that enslaved people. Almost all cultures enslaved people, and we were the first to free the slaves. So, I mean, the hypocrisy is shameless, and it is very, kids, I want them to have a decent future. But anyway, I want to just go on this hypocrisy. And about the Talmud, it's a very hateful document about all other races besides the chosen race.
Yes.
And these people at the SPLC and the ADL, they go off any white person who shows any, desire to maintain, pride in their heritage. All of a sudden they're these kooky kooks. And it's just totally wrong.
It's got nothing to do with the Talmud, okay? The idea of the globalists is they want to destroy the regional, historical, and cultural identity of everybody on Earth, blend them all together to make them easier to control. Because if you don't have a solid sense of who you are and what your place in the world and place in history is, you're easier to control. That's why we saw the attacks on the Confederate flag. We're seeing the flooding of Europe with all these Middle Easterners, the refugees and illegal immigrants into the United States. They're trying to erase this idea of a regional identity in order to bring us under their control. And it's backfiring terribly because, like everything else coming out of the liberal philosophy, it's based on that intellectual fraud of an idea that you can re-engineer the thoughts in the human brain by changing the environment around them. It's never worked. It never will. It's based on an intellectual hoax. Margaret Mead's Coming of Age in Samoa.
Yeah. Just one thing, though. I don't think it's across the board. I don't think they're doing it in China. I don't think they're doing it. I think it's really pointed at Western peoples, at Europeans in particular, and that's what's concerning me, because I don't see them, even with the pride issues, they're not concerned with other races.
No, they're basically trying to get rid of the one group most able to stand up and resist the rise of an oligarchical structure. And, and that's what it's really all about. Anyway, Elizabeth, gotta let you go. Got a bunch of callers, got a bunch of news, and we're getting short on time here. So we're going to switch over to John in Rancho Cucamonga. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, good afternoon, Mike. A great show again as usual. I discussed with your call screener there that I had one topic, but I just wanted to make a secondary remark about Donald Trump, depending on how much time you give me. So, first things first, one of your previous callers had stated that the mark of the beast is already here, and he gave us his interpretation of that. The 501c3, which is a section of the Title 26 of the U.S. Code, known as the Internal Revenue Code, and I agree with him that that has done a lot of damage in this country. But in my way of thinking, that's not really the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast, in my opinion, is that it prevents commerce from taking place unless it's complied with, is really the Social Security number. I cannot get employed without giving a Social Security number. This has been going on for many years. Mm-hmm. Even if I'm an independent consultant, which I am, if I tell my client who's hiring me for electrical engineering services that I don't want to fill out a W-9 form and I don't want to give him a Social Security number, guess what? He's going to go find another electrical engineer.
Well, first of all, I hate to be the one to break this to you. It's no longer called the Social Security number because Social Security is bankrupt, and they're going to be cutting off those checks really soon. It's now called the Taxpayer Identification Number, meaning that the money goes from you to them, but don't dare expect a penny of it to come back anytime soon.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. I didn't think you were going to go into that. On the W-9 form, they do allow for the fact of the existence of a Social Security number, and they do put it in the area where, when you put your Social Security number in there, it's under taxpayer ID information, where you say you're volunteering to be a taxpayer. Anyway, the second point, Mike, was that about Donald Trump. If he can slow down what's going on here with the globalism and the one world government. And if he does some of the things he says he's going to do, as far as the law and so forth, that would be something. And I think we should, count our blessings. I don't know that. Oh,
I agree. I agree. Donald Trump on his worst day is still far better than Hillary Clinton on her best day.
The alternative. That's correct. And the thing is, unless and until we get control of the banking system, the central banking, where they make money out of nothing and then sell it to us for a certain amount of cash, and until we get the courts under control and have honest judges and until we can get the lawyers out of everything and address their issues with pledging an oath to a foreign government, we're not going to quite get our country back in. I think there's time to do that yet.
John, let me share an insight from project management theory. Okay, you don't start out and say, we're going to do something really, really grand. You take the task that you want to accomplish and you break it into little, tiny, manageable, solvable tasks, and you do them one at a time. And yes, we'd like to see all these changes in the United States, but what's the first thing we need to do? And that is bring back an honest, verifiable election system.
Sure. Well, that's fine. I was looking at the end result, Mike. Not starting with that. I'm just saying.
Okay.
We'll get to the end point. Hopefully we'll have time to do that.
All right. Well, John,
thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Andy in Texas. Aloha, Andy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Well, hey, back in the 70s, they used to show us that gold in Fort Knox and whatnot. And since then, we haven't seen anything since Nixon took us off the gold standard completely and whatnot. My question is, we had a bunch of gold in the bottom of the Twin Towers and whatnot, and when Germany wanted their gold back, we sent them gold that was tungsten centered. And,
no, hold it. You got some of your facts a little bit discombobulated. There was gold stored at the base of the World Trade Towers, but it disappeared the night before 9/11 happened. When Germany demanded their gold back, what they got was gold that was not their original deposited bars. And it's important to understand these gold bullion depositories are like safety deposit boxes. The actual item that you put in is the item you will eventually take out. What Germany got back were gold bars that did not have the original German hallmarks and stamps on them, and when tested, turned out to be much, much less pure. Now, the tungsten cord gold bars are a separate issue that was uncovered in Germany when they were taking investment gold bars and starting to assay them for possible jewelry use. And by the way, it's also happened in New York, where jewelry companies who are making jewelry are buying these investment gold bars as a source of gold, and they'll dig into them to be making rings and bracelets, and all of a sudden their drills break. So somebody literally robbed Fort Knox. I think we have to look for Auric Goldfinger driving around here somewhere. Andy, going to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go back to the phones here. Kim in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
We lost her.
We lost Kim. All right, getting on back to the news here. Let's talk a little bit about the refugee crisis and immigration. And with a mind to my comment before about the goal of the globalists is to destroy human sense of a regional, cultural, historical identity. Because if you don't have a strong sense of who you are much easier to control. So we're looking over at Germany, and almost half of Germans are now of the opinion that all of this refugee migration is undermining their society. It's turning into something other than Germany. The nation that they grew up in, built, and loved is vanishing before their very eyes. And that is exactly what the globalists are trying to do all over Europe and here in the United States of America. And in these last few weeks of Obama's administration, they're keeping the gates wide open and continuing these various abuses. Apparently over in Philadelphia, which is maintaining their sanctuary city policy, the Philadelphia police refused to hand over an alleged child rapist for deportation, was here illegally, raped a child, and the police let him bail out. He's back on the streets. I have to wonder at what point the citizens of these various sanctuary cities are going to have had enough and start marching on City Hall and say, this city belongs to those of us who live here and work here and built this place, and it's not to be taken away from us and given away to people who couldn't make it in their own countries. And that's the reality of what's going on here. They have been surveying all these refugees coming into Europe. Only 13% of them are coming from the war areas. Everybody else is just taking advantage of the open borders to come up into Europe and get free stuff. Now, down in Nassau County, Florida, a sheriff's deputy, Eric Oliver, was struck by a vehicle full of illegal aliens that was running from Border Patrol agents on Tuesday. If we didn't have this open borders policy, he would still be alive today. Now, earlier in the week, we mentioned how the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General mentioned that some blank green cards have gone missing and expressed concern that these cards could be used to allow criminals and illegal immigrants and terrorists to remain in this country. Well, it turns out the problem was a little bit bigger than they let on, because now they're acknowledging it's 200,000 blank green cards have vanished, and that's 200,000 illegal immigrants, criminals, and terrorists who are going to be walking around the streets. Meanwhile, in all of these sanctuary cities across America, we're seeing crime skyrocket. And it's not just here in the United States. Over in Austria, they're seeing a significant rise in criminal complaints made against the refugees. I love that video we had earlier in the week where 60 Minutes went over to Europe to make a positive video about the refugees. And wow, wasn't it wonderful having all this multiculturalism come on in? And they got attacked and beaten up by the refugees. Now, over at the United Nations, the Secretary General is weeping and wringing his hands and crying that the masses have rejected globalism in favor of nationalism. I hate to tell you this, but we masses, we are the civilization here. And we do have a right to decide what's going to work for ourselves. And the big problem with globalism is everywhere it's being implemented, it has been a disaster for ordinary people. The globalists love it. They're building a single giant planetary human ranch on which they can permanently harvest all of our wealth to build themselves crystal palaces to live in. And they all dream of that golden throne of planet Earth, whose seat will be eventually polished by their own back end. That's what's in their dreams here. But for everybody else, It's been a disaster. Why should we go along with a policy that is harming ourselves, our communities, our country? What are you thinking? We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I want to give you a little history of Fort Knox, because a lot of people are very concerned what's been going on there. First of all, the last actual audit of the gold in Fort Knox was in 1953. I was 1 year old. Now, in 1974, 3 years after Nixon's gold shock, when people were starting to wonder if there still was the American people's gold in Fort Knox, because remember, when Roosevelt confiscated all the gold and they built Fort Knox to house it, they were out there saying, it's still the American people's gold, and we will take good care of it for you. Suckers. So, in 1974, they had what they called a televised audit. It was nothing of the sort. They allowed television crews and some witnesses down there. They opened the doors and let people look at a stack of gold. They weren't allowed to touch it or test it, but they only opened one of the vaults. Now, in theory, Fort Knox audits the gold every year, not by counting the actual gold bricks, but by walking around and counting the vault doors that still have the seals on them. But we know seals can be faked. And interestingly enough, 7 of the last 12 of those audit reports are missing. We found that out during a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. So we don't really know, and we certainly should not ever take the U.S. government's word about anything, especially as important as our gold, especially when we saw how the New York Federal Reserve, J.P. Morgan, Bank of France, Bank of England were playing fast and loose with other people's gold. You know, a few years back, I got to do a couple of segments on History Channel's America's Book of Secrets, and one of the segments was called The Gold Conspiracy. And when it came on out, we were all denounced by all these financial writers. How could you even begin to say that we're not being trustworthy with other people's gold, and you know, that there might not be gold in Fort Knox? And over the last several years, it's come on out. Everything that we had in that show has been verified and vindicated. Gold prices were being fixed, along with LIBOR and everything else. Tungsten cord gold bars. How do we know that everything that's in Fort Knox isn't really gold-plated tungsten? Unless somebody goes down there, counts the bars, and runs an ultrasound test. We don't know. We're just asked to blindly trust the government, and that, of course, is the biggest mistake anybody can make. Now, moving on, you remember what I said about the anti-Trump protesters not putting out a positive public image to gain any kind of support? Over in Chicago, there was a video about how these 4 men beat up an elderly supporter of Donald Trump, left him on the ground, and stole his car. You know, we're doing this for love and Hillary and all the rest of this other stuff. Well, the good news is, apparently the 4 identified from the video that was shot at the scene have now been arrested by the Chicago Police Department. Boy, if there's any group that ought to be sent over to that torture center the Chicago police were running, it's these 4. And let's find out who put them up to it. Okay. Now, getting into Brexit. Hang on just a second, because somebody just sent me a story. Apparently, Dallas is now on the verge of having to declare bankruptcy. Their pension plan is $7 billion short of meeting its obligations. They need $1 billion right now just to stay current, and Dallas' annual budget is only $3 billion. And this gets on back to that mortgage-backed security fraud on Wall Street that made all these Wall Street people insanely rich, and nobody went to jail for any of it. Because when they were putting together these mortgage-backed security bundles back in 2007, 2008, they were hot items. Everybody wanted them. Wall Street's pet rating agencies rated these bundles all AAA, which made it legal for pension plans to invest in them. And pension plans did. And then the whole fraud collapsed, and pensions all over America were defunded. And nobody has the courage to stand up and say, this is the fault of the guys on Wall Street. Instead, cities are being driven into bankruptcy. Or the managers of pensions are saying, oh, you guys, you're living too long. You were supposed to die 6 months after you stopped working for us. What is this getting into old age thing? If you're a loyal American, you'll commit suicide as soon as you're no longer useful to the corporations. Yes. Have faith and you'll be renewed. That's a reference to Logan's Run, the original movie, where you were only allowed to live to 30 years old. And after that, well, you were just too old to be of any use to anybody, and poof, you're gone. So getting on back to Brexit, we are hearing now that Virgin Group chief Sir Richard Branson is back-rolling a scheme to find some way to stop the Brexit. This is from a leaked memo. And they're going to bring back phony Tony Blair, the guy who lied Great Britain into the war in Iraq. They somehow feel that he's going to be the voice that will rally the British people to remain the slaves of the European Central Bank and let Brussels tell them how to live their lives. It's amazing here. It's kind of an oddball story. Over in Pennsylvania, a truck driver, Darren C. Walp, was on the road with a truck full of corn on a Gage County highway when he was notified by text message that his job had just disappeared. And so I guess Darren figured, well, you know, if I don't have a job anymore, I'm not going to do the job anymore. And he left 1,000 bushels of corn lying on the road. And unfortunately, they arrested him for creating a public nuisance, and he's bonded out of jail. But it shows, you know, I'm sure that a lot of bosses are thinking about how great it would be to text message somebody they've just been fired so they don't have to deal with the repercussions. Well, the repercussions are still going to happen. All right, let's talk about the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. Accusations are still flying back and forth over the young lady who has had her arm destroyed, probably going to have to be amputated by a concussion grenade. The police are saying, no, we weren't using concussion grenades. She was carrying a pipe bomb. There's another story that came out of Oraz.com. Apparently one of the protesters was shot in both kneecaps by Standing Rock police. It's just amazing. Now, there's a video that we have on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com where Mandan sheriffs threaten to arrest water protectors. And the story is very, very simple. Okay? These two people were wearing Water is Life shirts. And they were just in this restaurant having lunch, and they weren't bothering anybody. And the two police officers asked them to come over to the table and then told them they had to leave the restaurant immediately or face arrest for disorderly conduct. And it's all captured on video. These people were not being disorderly. They were just minding their own business, eating their lunch, and the police call them on over and say, get out of the restaurant. You're being disorderly. We're going to put you in jail. And then the police wonder why they're not getting any sympathy from the American public when one of them gets shot. I think what is going on is that too many entities, organizations, whatever, are absolutely convinced that they can control their public image through that corporate media because they have in the past. But they can't anymore. First of all, because nobody trusts the corporate media anymore. Last poll I saw, only 6% of Americans trust that corporate media. And people are shooting their own videos, they're going viral, and we're seeing what the reality is. And so if the police want a positive public image, the police in public have to create it. They can't just hire an ad agency or a public relations firm to plant some news on the TV set to remind everybody how great they are. That doesn't work anymore. Not in an age where police brutality is instantly transmitted all over the country. Now, hopefully, this is going to calm things down. It could go the other way. But hundreds of U.S. military veterans are now heading to Standing Rock to defend those Dakota Access Pipeline protesters from the police brutality. And so they're basically going to have literally an army of bodyguards. I hope the police will stand down. But again, we live in a country where corporate profits are the top priority. That's what we're going to do. By golly, that's what we're going to do. We're going to make the corporations rich, and who cares what the people think? Do you know how ironic it is where tomorrow we're going to be celebrating Thanksgiving about how our ancestors first came to this country and they had that hard winter and they were saved because the Indians took such good care of them, and at the same time, we've got the police up there in North Dakota trying to kick these Native Americans off their land. It is their land by treaty in order to run an oil pipeline through that is a serious threat to their drinking water supply. Can you see the irony of that juxtaposition of historical events? You know, we'll make a big deal about the Indians for Thanksgiving Day, but in the real world, just get rid of those people. It's amazing. I mean, if you want to talk about war crimes and brutality, you look at the way the Native Americans have been treated. Things like the massacre at Sand Creek. Little historical footnote, I'll bet most of you didn't know. The massacre at Sand Creek was led by a Methodist minister. God wills it! God wills it! Kill him! Kill him! Doesn't the Bible say thou shalt not kill? Well, it doesn't apply here. Down in Australia, the state of Victoria has now issued a permanent ban on fracking. Good for them. Now, here are the unpleasant realities. Here in the United States of America, fracking has caused a huge amount of damage, contaminated drinking water supplies, killed the fish in lakes, ponds, and streams, triggered seismic activity all over Oklahoma and nearby environs, may have triggered the quake that damaged the Washington Monument, and they're not actually getting the volume of oil and gas out of these wells they thought they were going to. During that oil price war with Russia, the fracking companies were losing money. Some of them actually went out of business. It was a harebrained scheme, and it did not work. Now, a couple of computer stories, then we're going to take a phone call here. Skype has been down this morning for much of the United States, primarily in the northeastern states. Fortunately, obviously, since you're hearing my voice, we are able to Skype from Hawaii to Round Rock, Texas. But most of southern England, Spain, Japan, and Ecuador were having problems, as well as Moscow and St. Petersburg in Russia. And I have seen that on the Internet, there are all kinds of weird routing issues getting packets to and from the mainland. We were having some issues with that earlier in the day. Thankfully, it seems to have gone away. Now, as you know, one of the primary targets of ransomware are hospitals. And the thinking is very simple. They will pay the ransom right now, and they'll do it very, very fast, because without those computerized records, they don't know how to treat their patients. They could actually kill somebody with the wrong treatment or medication. And apparently one of the Trojans that targets U.S. healthcare organizations avoids detection by going to sleep for prolonged periods after the initial infection, so security scans don't pick it up in operation. And this article I'm looking at is saying the healthcare sector has been disproportionately targeted. Of the top 20 most affected organizations, of the highest number of infected computers, 40% are in healthcare, because they know they'll pay the ransom rather than risk harm to their patients and the inevitable lawsuit. And where's the NSA when all of this is happening? Weren't they supposed to be protecting our nation's computer infrastructure? Or are they behind the ransomware? Is the ransomware like civil asset forfeiture, another way for a desperately broke and hopelessly in debt government to pillage its own population? We're going to go back to the phones here. Fran in Washington State, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
There you are. If there was a little glitch, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. You're so quick. I'm calling for a comment on the Dakota Access Pipeline and the protectors and Donald Trump. I listened to you faithfully. I voted for Trump. I think he's got a lot of right ideas, but I'm begging, please don't start your administration by running roughshod over the Sioux people. Something came across my desk the other day that somebody hollered at one of the water protectors and telling them to go home.
I believe that land has actually been their home since before Columbus.
Well, yeah. And if you saw 2012, before they were actually going to take off on these arcs, and the tidal wave is coming, and they closed the door on all the Chinese workers that built the things, and there was climatic scenes where don't start this new world by shutting the door and killing an untold number of Chinese that built these things. And then they open the doors and da-da-da-da-da. But it's like that with Trump. I mean, please work with the tribes. The narcocracy has ridden roughshod over all of our environment for way too long.
Well,
Surely
part of the problem is that they have exploited environmental concern for a fast buck to the point where, unfortunately, the environmental movement has discredited itself by getting on board with human-caused global warming and carbon taxes and carbon credits, and they've kind of blown their credibility. And it's actually, in the long run, it's going to bring more harm to the environment. Just like the feminist movement's obsession with rape and so forth actually resulted in greater risk to women. But they're not thinking about what's actually making the world better, just what they can get votes and money and power and book deals off of. I would hope that Trump, and I understand he's got a financial interest in this pipeline, but in theory, under the blind trust, he can't have that anymore. But I would think they would work to find a compromise. Run that pipeline somewhere else where these people's drinking water is not at risk. Okay? Fran, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And getting on back to the Dakota Access Pipeline, we're dealing with what's called the NIMBY phenomenon, not in my backyard. And so anytime you have any kind of a facility that represents a possible threat, it winds up being put on the land of whoever has the least political clout. And we know that because there's that nuclear plant over in New York built on Native American land that has been leaking. It's got a history of leaks, Indian Point Nuclear Facility. And they're still letting it run. And by the way, it is past the end of its design lifespan. So, now then, getting on back to computers. Apparently there is a malware attack against ATMs that's been spotted by Kaspersky, where apparently ATMs, when there is one of the criminals standing nearby, will all of a sudden just spit cash out. And it's basically hacking these centralized systems to make them issue cash. And the criminals don't need to steal your card or your number. It's just whatever cash is inside the ATM gets dumped out. And it's been hitting in Armenia, Estonia, the Netherlands, Poland, Russia, and Spain, and the United Kingdom. Now, as part of their child pornography campaign, and I'm fully on board with that, by the way, I really think it has to be dealt with. But apparently the FBI, on the basis of just one single warrant, hacked over 8,000 computers in 120 countries. And what they did was they took over a dark web child pornography site. And instead of shutting it down, the FBI ran this child pornography website and used it to plant spyware and malware on the people visiting the site. Now, the problem with that is this means the FBI has been trafficking in child porn. Why are they exempt from the law? Why is it okay for the government to commit a crime in order to find other criminals? And again, I agree with what they're trying to do. I just don't agree with how they're doing it. It's a little hypocritical. It's like when a motorcycle police officer pulls you over to give you a ticket in your car for not wearing your seatbelt. It seems less about public safety and more about finding another reason to grab your money. Now, there is a prank video circulating around, and it doesn't cause permanent harm, but apparently if you play this video, after the video is over, it's planted some code that slows your iPhone down until you have to do a full reset. And it's just somebody's idea of a dirty trick, but if your iPhone is all of a sudden acting weird, do a full reset on it. All right, there's the music. Got to take a break for station identification. Back with the lovely Lady Claire after these words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on BAM User TV, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who's going to share our third hour on this day before Thanksgiving. And lovely Lady Claire, what's the first thing that you want to talk about?
Well, the first thing that I want to talk about, which is getting almost no coverage whatsoever on the corporate press, is intense persecution of Christians in the Middle East, particularly with regard to Daesh and what they are doing and have been doing. Christians have been killed. The internal and external displacement of these communities has been horrific. And the question is, what can be done? And I think it's got to be a multi-pronged solution, because Daesh is using physical torture, deprivation of food, sexual humiliation and rape.
Which they learned from what the U.S. was doing to the Iraqis
over
in Abu Ghraib.
I know.
I feel like I need to insert a comment here.
Okay.
We know that Daesh/ISIS/ whatever they're calling themselves this week is a manufactured group for propaganda purposes. They had all those phony beheading pictures and everything. And I think they're attacking Christians not because they necessarily hate Christians per se, but in order to anger Christians in other countries into supporting the war effort against what they've been told is the enemy. I need to move your microphone just a little tiny bit.
All right.
Okay.
But I have some thoughts also on this. Yes, I believe you're right on that. But I think a multi-pronged approach is important. I think that people out there need to find legitimate charities that are supporting those Christians from this neck of the world who have been experiencing persecution, no matter the actual geopolitical reason. And I would suggest to every single imam in this country to condemn what they are seeing Daesh do and say, we don't do that to convert people. I suggest that they also stand with solidarity with everyone in the Middle East, not just Christians, but the Yazidi, etc., who are also being persecuted and hurt. And hold open houses here, and at the top of whatever people are going to see when they come in, the words, we condemn torture and coercion to bring people to Islam wholeheartedly. I think that's also going to give Americans a little better perspective that Islam is not monolithic, just like Christianity or Buddhism or Judaism is not.
There are good people and bad people and all of these things. Part of the problem is that a lot of Muslim imams have made public statements denouncing torture and persecution, but our media chooses not to report on that in order to present an image of Muslims as somebody we must make war on, while, of course, the globalists and pro-refugee people are out there saying, no, Muslims are really good people, and it's a clash of two different agendas just banging into each other head on.
Well, then I would suggest that the independent media start talking to these communities here in the United States and saying, what is your philosophy on conversion? And get it out there if the lamestream media refuses to, which apparently they do refuse to do.
Well, I agree, and I mean, again, let's be honest. There are abuses in the conversion process in every religion. I remember when I lived in Southern California, long before I knew this lovely lady, there was this group called the Children of God, and they were extremely violent.
Mm-hmm.
And there were several cases, and this actually happened to a young lady that I had been dating at the time. They would literally grab people off the streets and try and brainwash them into their particular version of Christianity, and those that they couldn't brainwash disappeared. And the conclusion by the authorities was that their bodies were out in a shallow grave someplace in the Mojave.
Wow, that's pretty scary. And I'd also like to recommend a little bit of reading for our listeners and our viewers if you've never seen it. It is the poetry of the first Gnostic saint of Islam who happened to be a gal, Rabia al-Basri. This woman had every reason to not really be excited about religion, born dirt poor, was a slave, but her master gave her her freedom, and she wrote some of the most beautiful love poetry to God. In fact, you could probably, if you put it side by side with Claire of Assisi's love poetry to God, you would have to think these gals were kind of on the same page here when it came to love of their perception of God. And I commend it to you highly. You can find translations online. But again, Islam is not monolithic, just as Christianity, Buddhism, or Judaism isn't. You've got violent, and you have people who would never hurt anyone, ever. And again, I think our Muslim community needs to come to the independent media and say, hey, this is what we're about. We're not going to hurt anybody. I think that's really, really important, particularly right now.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
We're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And if you're curious, the second voice you're hearing is the lovely Lady Claire, who is spending the third hour on this day before Thanksgiving. My attitude is good people are going to do good things. Mm-hmm. Bad people are going to do bad things, and both will often cite religion as their justification.
Yeah.
There are a lot of very good people who are Christian. There are some very bad people who are Christian.
Yep.
In particular, some of those pedophile priests who I think join the church in order to have that instant respectability of the robes. The same thing with the Jewish people. Some of them are real sharks, like Bernie Madoff. And then I can't help but think back to this wonderful person I knew in Hollywood, Renee Valente.
Oh, she was a sweetheart.
She was an absolute champ.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Islam. There are fanatics. A lot of them are being encouraged by covert U.S. programs and supplied by covert U.S. programs. But the vast majority of Muslims are just as peaceful and calm as the vast majority of Christians and Jews. That's just the way it is. It's the few extremists that are fodder for the propagandists.
I absolutely agree. I'd like to sort of bop on over to Germany right now.
Go ahead and bop. But don't deny the Holocaust. They just threw that 88-year-old grandmother back into prison again.
May I have a drum roll, please? Okay. Chancellor Angela Merkel has declared war on fake news as Europe brands Russia's RT Sputnik as dangerous propaganda. And, of course, she's echoing the U.S.
Yes, of
with
course
this whole fake news thing, not to be confused with Brian Williams, who was lying through his teeth for years on primetime TV.
You mean he wasn't the first man on the moon?
Okay. German Chancellor Angela Merkel warned on Wednesday against the power of fake news on social media to roil the establishment and spur the rise of populists after launching her campaign for a fourth term. Speaking in Parliament for the first time since her announcement on Sunday that she would seek re-election next year, Merkel cautioned that public opinion was being manipulated on the Internet. No.
And that's our job, gosh darn it.
No, Chancellor Merkel. People are finding...
Merkel is out there trying to dig up Goebbels for some advice.
Yeah, sort of channeling that.
Yes.
Unfortunately, people are finding truth with the alternative media presented online, and they're beginning to realize the degree to which they have been propagandized by both their governments and their prostitutes.
And the corporations.
Yeah, and the corporations, for example. Consider the following, reported at GatsenInstitute.org last August. Germany's migrant rape crisis has now spread to cities and towns in all of 16 of Germany's federal states. Germany now finds itself in a vicious cycle. Most of the perpetrators will never be found, and the few who are frequently given lenient sentences. Only 1 in 10 rapes in Germany is reported, and just 8% of rape trials result in convictions, according to Minister of Justice Heiko Maas.
Well, I mean, they've gone even further than that. The EU is demanding that when a refugee commits a crime, the fact that they are a refugee is not to be reported in the media. Mm-hmm. They'll just, an attacker did this horrible thing, and that's all the public is supposed to know.
And it gets worse.
Yes.
Up to 90% of the sex crimes committed in Germany in 2014 do not appear on the official statistics, according to Andre Schultz, the head of the Association of Criminal Police. And apparently, this guy's got sand. He's gone on record and said that there are strict instructions from the top not to report offenses committed by refugees. It is extraordinary that certain offenders are deliberately not being reported about, and the information is classified as confidential. High-ranking police officer in Frankfurt was quoted in Bild. Now, I got to tell you, Mike, if I were a German woman right now, I would be lining up for whatever self-defense courses were available and get all legal training possible in all legal modalities to prevent this from happening to me.
Oh, gun sales across Europe in those countries where they're still allowed to have guns. Gun sales are through the roof. Same thing here.
And if I were a lady in Germany, I'd be traveling with other gals who hopefully had also been my sister participants in these self-defense courses. And Chancellor Merkel has got to realize that this is a reality for many of your German sisters. This is not fake news nor any kind of a conspiracy theory. And that is why, or one of the major reasons, that her candidacy this time is going to fall flatter than a fritter, because she and the rest of the German government have allowed this situation to get so bad.
Oh, yeah. It is. And again, this is all coming out of George Soros and the New World Order people, and Angela Merkel has been fully on board with it. She's a primary force in trying to hold the European Union together, even to the point of impoverishing the German people in order to prop up the failed economies of the other European Union member states.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed that she's going to run for re-election next year. She's been advised by her own party that she's probably going to lose.
Yep.
And I'm sure that Merkel is just saying, no, we buy the Diebold voting machines. We get twice as many as Hillary had, and I will be...
Yeah. Mike, did you cover that Trump has named former political opponent as UN ambassador?
I think I covered, I covered his director of education.
Okay. He is replacing anti-Putin Samantha Power with Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, who has accepted the offer to be his ambassador to the UN. She is the daughter of immigrants from India, and she served 3 terms in South Carolina State House before winning the governorship in 2010 and again in 2014. Now, initially, she backed Rubio and then Cruz. She is the first woman in the state's history to hold this role, and the nation's second Asian American governor. If she is confirmed, Haley would succeed Samantha Power, who has been President Barack Obama's UN ambassador since 2013, and who has been the most vocal opponent of the Russian regime's overtures at the UN. And, Michael, I would say that this has been a very intelligent choice. Bravo.
I would agree, and it does telegraph, along with the fact that Tulsi Gabbard is under consideration for Secretary of State, it does telegraph that Donald Trump wants to pull back from the war agenda.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to take a second here to take a phone call.
Okay.
Will in Cincinnati. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, hola, Mike and Claire.
Aloha.
I haven't got to talk to you, Claire.
Aloha.
So, Mike, I just wanted to, first of all, I'm so with you on steering away from the Warhawks. That's why I'm hesitant with Newt Gingrich. However, I think he could be useful, but let's keep in mind he is a Warhawk.
Yes.
Agreed.
I wanted... Go ahead.
No, please do.
We were agreeing with you.
I wanted to let you know that I appreciate what you're doing, and I share your show, and there are so many people hungry for what you're doing. However, I do think that there is room. I think there's a place for people. There's people in every state who listen to you, and you know what, Mike? I'd like to meet some of them, and if we could arrange some kind of situation where we have conventions for the What Really Happened show, the What Really Happened show convention, and all the listeners can come meet and can come to one place and meet each other, and we can share ideas. I want you to know if you ever decide to arrange something like that, you have boots on the ground in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm willing and I'm ready.
Well,
to help arrange that.
We love Cincinnati. We were there in, was it 2008 for the World Choir Games?
2012.
2012.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, but we really liked it there.
Yeah.
Our next step, after the first of the year, first of all, I'm going to be overhauling the What Really Happened website to fix some of the problems, improve its functionality, improve its security. And our next task after that is Claire and I would like to move back to the mainland because I get a lot of invitations to speak at various seminars and conferences, and it is simply too expensive to go there from Hawaii. We can't afford it, and usually the organizers of these affairs don't have the budget to bring us from Hawaii. Once we're on the ground on the mainland, we would like to organize something as well. And we do know there's a lot of support. When we were in Cincinnati, we got recognized on the street there. Yep. So it would be nice to be there. And I did like Cincinnati. I'd love to go back there.
Yes, and he found his pickle and pimento.
That's an inside joke. What it is, here in Hawaii, there's a lot of stuff that we don't get in our supermarket that you take for granted on the mainland. And every time we go to the mainland, I always go to the supermarket and I buy up all the junk food that I can't get here. And pickle and pimento loaf and the rest of it. And
but seriously, that's our goal, first part of next year. And thank you very much for your support and your understanding of what we're trying to do.
Yes, and I want you to know that even if you guys can't personally make it, the movement, this would give so much momentum to our movement for us. I want to meet Steve in Ohio. I'd love to meet Justin in New Jersey, Mo in Florida. You know what I mean? I want to share ideas with these people, and and maybe if you never know, even if you guys can't be there, guess what? We would still show up, and I just want you to know that.
Well, if somebody puts it together, I mean, if we can't be there, I mean, what's the point of having a convention where I can't hit the bar? But we could always do a video feed the way Edward Snowden does.
Yeah.
We have the equipment to do that.
Yeah.
But
so anyway, I definitely love I love the fact that we're not just, oh, hey, we're happy our guy got elected. No, we're going to hold people's feet to the fire.
Good.
We're paying attention to every move, and that there are, and yes, there will be criticism. We will speak up as we have been if they do not make the right move.
Absolutely agree.
Yes.
And like I said on the day after the election, I said our work is not over. It is just getting started. Will, thanks an awful lot for all the kind words. We're going to let you go here. We're coming up on a commercial break, and Claire's got some more things to talk about. So what is next on your list, lovely
Lady Claire? Next on my list? Well, apparently the European Army is going to happen, and Britain could be forced to help fund the project because Article 50, the clause which must be invoked to trigger an exit from the Union, will not have been enacted by the time the project is ratified. And
which is funny because that European Union Army is being prepared to bring Britain back into the EU if it actually leaves. I mean, that's how twisted and sick this whole situation is.
Yeah, and if the UK proves incapable of untangling itself from the plan, it could be required to shell up £420 million per year. That's pretty draconian.
I don't understand why there's any difficulty in the Brexit moving forward. Just cut those lines that link the banks together.
Yep.
Put a border control station on that channel tunnel and, fill the English Channel with sharks, and I think the problems are going to be solved.
Okay. All righty. Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree with you. Full on. And just a couple of notes on Standing Rock. And one thing that is positive is it looks like there is a contingency of veterans who have decided to band together and protect the rights of the indigenous people peacefully protesting down there. I think that's a good thing.
I think it's it could either calm things down or escalate it completely out of control.
Yeah.
We got to take a break here for some commercials. We'll be back with more news and the Lady Claire after these few words. America, welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go back and take another phone call. Mateus in Canada, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael and Claire.
Aloha.
Yeah, aloha. I wanted to call in about something to do with the pardon, but then when I realized that Claire is here, I have something I wanted to mention.
Okay.
There's a Christian evangelist who's one of my heroes, even though I'm not Christian. And his name is Ken Hovind, and he has something called Dinosaur Adventureland. Anyway, he's got this great debate strategy that can work really well if you're having a theological debate or if you're just trying to get through to like some narrow-minded person politically. It goes like this. Okay, do you know everything? Just act it out with me.
Oh, okay. No, I don't.
Okay. Would you say that you know half of everything?
Oh, not even that.
Okay, well, let's just be generous. Let's just say that you know half of everything.
Okay.
It's possible that God exists in that half that you don't know. And it's a good point, and the same can apply to political. Like, do you know blah, blah, blah. Is it possible that, okay, so I just wanted to pass that along. And if you could ever get him on as a guest, he went to jail for many years for talking for talking about the central banks and all the stuff that we talk about here.
Okay.
Kind of ahead of his time, and he preached it to so many people that he was really persecuted for it.
Well, I don't think they could put him in jail for expressing, the fact that the Federal Reserve is a privately owned central bank. There may be something else in there. It may have to do with his Dinosaur Adventure Land, which actually closed in 2009. I noticed when National Geographic came out with their article about why people don't trust science, trying to basically say you should just accept what any scientist tells you at face value. One of the examples they used about the gullibility of people was the Dinosaur Adventure Land, which for those of you who are not familiar with what we're talking about, it was kind of this theme park for biblical creationists where humans and dinosaurs are living together. Of course, in the wake of Jurassic Park and all of its franchise spin-offs, that's not such a radical idea anymore. But it never did catch on, and it did close in 2009. I think they're having a little better luck with the Ark Adventure over in, I think it's either Kentucky or Indiana.
Well, it's a free country, and it's freedom of speech. If he wants to believe... he can believe what he wants to believe, and he can teach it to who he wants to teach it to. And the point is that he would have these high-profile debates with creationism versus evolution in universities, and he would just destroy them. It seems like impossible, but you listen to this guy's debates, and he's such a genius. It's like my head is almost spinning after. It's like, wait a second, is it possible? But anyway, just one other thing about presidential pardons. Can I just mention?
You have to be real quick. We're coming up on a commercial break.
Okay, I don't agree that just because Nixon got an unconstitutional pardon, I don't agree that precedent should be set that now Obama can give an unconstitutional pardon.
Well, good news there is Obama already came out, and in the context of Edward Snowden, said that he cannot issue a pardon until somebody has actually been charged in a court of law, and that instantly took off the table the possibility of a blanket preemptive pardon for Hillary Clinton and all of her people as well.
Okay, but I just want everyone to consider being less tolerant with this idea of precedent being set. If it's against the rules, who cares if it was if precedent was set? Like, we should just stick to the law, stick to the Constitution. Who cares if it was done in the past? There should just be no. Like,
I agree with you. I agree with you, and most Americans would be absolutely stunned to discover that most of what they're told is the law isn't really the law. It's just something the government started doing, and everybody went along with it, and they just said, okay, well, this is working for us. We're going to keep on doing it. I'll give you a good example. Would be the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, which was never actually ratified. And there was a court case, Sullivan versus United States, in which the judge, James C. Fox, admitted in the court record the 16th Amendment, on which the income tax is based, did not actually ratify. And then the judge goes on to admit, but we just sort of all act like it was. And that basically tells you right there, a lot of what you think is the law isn't really. It's just what the government can sell you to get your money and your obedience. Thanks a lot for the call, Mateus. We're going to let you go. We've got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Pardon me. Welcome back to our show here. I'm getting a lot of emails. Everybody's on board with this idea of having a convention, which is another name for a wild party. So far from home that word doesn't get back to you. Well, have it in Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and all the rest of that. I remember the good times I used to have at the SIGGRAPH conventions and the Mensa conventions, which are very wild parties. You wouldn't think. I'm going to share a little secret with all of you. At the Mensa conventions, we do not sit around playing chess. I will leave it at that. What is your next story?
Well, apparently, Facebook is quietly developing censorship tools for the Chinese government. According to the New York Times, which first reported Facebook's strategy, the social network has quietly developed software to suppress posts from appearing in people's news feeds in specific geographic areas, according to 3 current and former Facebook employees who asked for anonymity because the tool is confidential.
Not anymore.
Well, yeah, okay. The feature was created to help Facebook get into China, a market where the social network has been blocked, these people said, and Mr. Zuckerberg has supported and defended the effort, people added. Now, why in the heck would Zuckerberg support an effort that goes fundamentally against the premise of free speech? It's the money.
Of course it's the money.
Because
it's the money
while it remains to be seen.
And
yes.
Let's be honest, in the last couple of months, we have not exactly seen Facebook be the bastion of free speech.
Oh, heck no.
They've been canceling posts, canceling accounts. That's why people are going on over to Scene Life, which is the new Facebook replacement. And I'm already over there. I'm already getting followers, and people are they're deserting Facebook. And no wonder he's desperate to get into China. The American people don't want to deal with him anymore.
Yeah. Apparently, Facebook has been doing the suppression in countries like Pakistan, Russia, and Turkey, and keeping with the typical practice of American Internet companies that generally comply with government requests to block certain content after it is posted. According to its own data, Facebook blocked roughly 55,000 pieces of content in about 20 countries between July 2015 and December 2015, for example. But the censorship tool in China takes a step further by preventing content from appearing in feeds in China in the first place. Now, the New York Times adds that Facebook does not intend to suppress the posts itself, but is going to offer the software to enable a third party, in this case, most likely a partner Chinese company, to monitor popular stories and topics that bubble up as users share them across the social network, the people said. Facebook's partner would then have full control to decide whether these posts should show up in users' feeds. In effect, Facebook is willing to admit it's sold out its integrity to third-party Chinese vendor and arbiter simply to boost revenue and its stock price.
Well, here's what's going on. If you think about that approach, the person who makes the Facebook post sees it in their feed, their timeline. It just doesn't appear anywhere else when somebody else is looking at their timeline. And we have caught Facebook doing that here in this country with some of the content that we put on our Facebook pages. And then we'll sort of go in with a different browser to look at Facebook without logging in, and the posts are invisible. So they've already established the technology. They're just finding a new market for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, this is why people are going over to Scene Life.
Yeah. Mike, have you put that up at the website where you can find it, Scene Life?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
there's a couple of buttons right over in the left margin. Follow
Okay.
me on Scene Life. Follow me on Gab, which is the alternative for Twitter. And
All right.
I'm starting to do most of my social media posting on those two platforms now.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. An interesting development in the UK. Ex-child soldiers are suing the UK firm that hired them to be mercenaries in Iraq. 2 former child soldiers have threatened legal action against the private security company Aegis Defense Services over psychological harm they suffered when the company recruited them to be mercenaries in Iraq. They were recruited as child soldiers in Sierra Leone's brutal civil war, which ended in 2002. Their solicitor, Rebecca Reed of Lee Day, has told The Guardian. Years later, as adults, they were hired to work as security guards for Aegis in Iraq. Aegis, which is chaired by Tory MP Sir Nicholas Soames, won contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars to provide security to U.S. military bases before, during, and after the Iraq War. The company was taken over last year by the Canadian security company Gardaworld. Gardaworld, that's a name. The men have sent a letter before action to Aegis saying their experiences in Iraq compounded the psychological harm that they'd already suffered in childhood. And this is the first legal step in launching a civil claim for damages. And who in the world, with any shred of conscience, hires children as mercenaries and pays them $17 a day? I don't understand these people. And
I mean, look at how young they draft kids in this country. And I understand these kids are a lot younger.
Yeah.
But people who are in the business of war, they're just out there to win the war at the cheapest possible cost. And, the lives are disposable. Remember what Henry Kissinger said about military people. They're just dumb, stupid pawns to be used for foreign policy. And, once you're of a mindset where you think war is an acceptable thing to be doing, then all the evils that come with war become acceptable as well.
Well, in my world, no child on this planet should ever be collateral damage. Ever. Just, that's the way I look at it.
Well, the same applies with the drone strikes.
Yeah.
And I remember one of those horrible drone strikes where they were just picking targets who were exceptionally tall because they figured anybody who was going to be taller is going to be recruited by Al-Qaeda or ISIS.
And they were kids.
Yeah, they were kids on a field trip with their teacher. And they drone struck the teacher just thinking, well, he's tall, he fits the profile, and they struck this, and they killed all these kids.
Yeah. And,
But it was a good strike.
I hope this company is going to be sued out of existence, but unfortunately, this guy's got a lot of wealth and power, and I'm afraid that's only going to happen when pigs
Well, he's
fly.
basically going to go into court and say, look, they signed up.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to take a look at a little piece of good news from the President-elect's conversations, and that is Trump has backed off promise to bring back torture. And let me tell you how this came down. President-elect Trump has backed off on one of the most controversial pledges of his campaign today, his promise to bring back torture of detainees, and this was following a talk with retired General James Mattis. And he was told that torture doesn't work, as well as building a rapport with prisoners. Yay, General Mattis. Apparently, this general knows his history. And the reason I say this is the most effective interrogator for the Nazis during World War II was a guy by the name of Hans-Joachim Gottlob Scharf. He was a German Luftwaffe interrogator during the Second World War and was called the master interrogator of the Luftwaffe and possibly all of Nazi Germany. He also was so respected because all he would use was kindness and gentleness. There was absolutely no violence, no coercion whatsoever of the people he talked to. And he was so respected by the U.S. that after the war, he was invited to come over to the U.S. and teach his interrogation techniques because they were proven to work. And I think that's a nice turnabout on Trump's part. He's listening to people who know what they're talking about.
That is a good thing, and I'm glad he backed off on this promise. It was certainly one of the things I didn't agree with. All torture is going to get you is a politically expedient confession. You're not going to get the facts. the person being tortured is just going to say what the torturer wants him to say. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is still being described as the mastermind of 9/11, based solely on the fact that he confessed to the crime after being waterboarded 180 times.
Yep.
And also being forced to witness his children put in these dark metal boxes with stinging insects, and he got to sit there listening to them scream. Now, anybody who's out there who's a parent, if you were locked in a cage and right in front of you was your child in this metal box with stinging insects screaming, you'd confess to anything.
Yeah.
You'd confess to personally nailing Jesus to the cross. You'd confess to shooting down the Hindenburg, assassinating Abraham Lincoln. I mean, let's be honest. That's what torture is all about.
Yeah.
Getting a politically expedient confession. And by the way, unfortunately, this movie sort of came and went. It was called The Green Zone, and it was about all the lies of the Iraq War. And it was a great movie. I watched it several times while it was on cable. It may still be out there on Hulu or Netflix, or we're now on Amazon Prime because of Grand Tour,
yes,
which is apparently setting records. Amazon did absolutely the right thing, acquiring the hosts from Top Gear, and we watched the premiere show, and I guess the next episode is due out tomorrow. Yeah, that's worth the $10 a month right there. I got to tell you, we're so happy to have it. Unfortunately, we're still calling it Top Gear, even though it's not really. We're going to get sued for trademark infringement by the British Buggering Children Corporation.
Oh boy, we're going to a topic that's a little bit very serious right now. A little bit very serious. China has said that 3,000 have fled Myanmar after fighting along the border. Apparently, 4 ethnic armed groups have attacked security forces in the north of Myanmar, dealing a major blow to leader Aung San Suu Kyi's top goal, or stated goal, of reaching peace with ethnic minorities. 10 people, including policemen, government-supported militia fighters, and civilians, were killed, and 33 have been wounded in clashes since October 20th, according to Myanmar's Information Committee under the State Councilor's Office. The number of people seeking shelter at temporary refugee camps at Myanmar's Muse Township have exceeded 3,300. China has been very concerned by previous fighting along the porous borders and has put its armed forces on high alert and called for all sides to exercise restraint. And Chinese Foreign Minister Shuang has said that wounded people among the 3,000 Myanmar citizens have been taken to hospital. And the refugees are in the southwestern province of Yunnan, which shares a long border with Myanmar. And I have to wonder if one of those ethnic groups fighting against the Myanmar military are the Rohingya, the Muslim ethnic minority, who have watched helplessly as their homes have been burnt to the ground by ultra-Buddhist nationalists. Wow, I never thought I'd have to say, here come the Buddhists. But in Myanmar, apparently that's the case. And unless they can come to some kind of reconciliation, it appears that Myanmar may be on the verge of a civil war. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, it looks like it. We're still seeing all these war hawks just trying to get chaos and conflict going anywhere they can, so that they've got customers for their weapons, and they've got these desperate groups of people pledging themselves and future generations into debt slavery to the banks to pay for it all. And again, going back onto movies, there was a wonderful film called The International, which likewise, not putting out a positive image for banks, has disappeared. You have to hunt it down. And the story is about a bank sort of kind of modeled on BCCI, which is getting involved into the small arms trade, and the reason they're doing it is not because they're trying to control the conflict anywhere. They're trying to control the debt the conflict produces, because that's the real item of value in any war, is the debt it produces that's imposed on both sides. And that's why I keep saying banks love wars. Bankers love wars. Wars are the bankers' richest harvest of debt.
Absolutely. Speaking of wars, I'd like to bop on over to Syria. And this is reported through Press TV. And one of the things that I encourage our readers and listeners to do is to read the foreign press in English. And this is Press TV in English, comes out of Iran. And they usually have it right. And apparently, right now, Syrian militants are getting anti-aircraft missiles. A report says members of a foreign-sponsored militia group in Syria have received a considerable number of shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missiles. Mike, are those called manpads?
Yeah, it's a
okay.
manpad, a man-portable missile. And, of course, there's only one foreign sponsor of the militants in Syria, and that's the United States of America. So these guys are getting the Stingers.
Yep. And there was a video published by a pro-militant television network on Sunday. Terrorists from the so-called Ansar al-Islam group can be seen testing a low-altitude 9K-32 Strela 2 missile system in southwest Syrian provinces of Daraa and Quneitra. We in Ansar al-Islam Front have distributed several points of air defense to counter any attempt by the Syrian warplanes or helicopters which bomb points in Quneitra province. We have a good number of these missiles. And, at the end of his presidency, I find President Obama, in sort of giving the green light for letting this to happen, vicious and counterproductive. And
it makes a joke of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
Just like he's made a joke of the Medal of Freedom by giving it to all of the celebrity Trump bashers here. Yeah. And by the way, for you people out there who are ultimately paying for all of this stuff, a single Stinger manpad missile goes for $38,000.
That's a lot of change.
That's a lot of change there. I mean, imagine the U.S. government spending that money on your local school or keeping the roads together. I mean, the cost of the wars are just hideous.
Yeah.
And our nation has been in a wartime economy, a covert wartime economy, for a very, very long time, which is why the nation is crumbling. The infrastructure is not being repaired. We're suffering all the evils of any nation that is at war without them actually saying, we're a wartime economy and a wartime nation.
Yeah, and what it looks like is happening to me is that President Obama is trying to engineer U.S. and Russian forces going at it with each other in Syria even before Trump has taken the oath of office.
I think there's definitely a lot of people who would like to get a hot war going and stick Donald Trump with it the way they're going to stick him with the coming economic crash. And it's one of those areas in which I'm still concerned that Trump, being such an outsider, is kind of naive about just how dark Washington, D.C. politics can get. Certainly Jimmy Carter was caught off guard by some of what happened to him, in particular the sabotage of the Iranian hostage rescue.
Right.
Which basically ended his chances at re-election and allowed Reagan to become president.
Yeah, but I think in the case of Trump, he has a healthy respect for what he knows and what he doesn't know. And I think that he will try to pull in, on both issues, I think he's going to try to pull in the best minds he can find to give him the education he needs.
Okay, we got to take a break. We'll be back with the last segment of our show after these words. America, welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this day before Thanksgiving, and you had one last story you wanted to share with us.
Yep. 350 Palestinian minors are held in Israeli jails, and some have been slapped with life sentences. Israeli authorities are holding 350 Palestinian kids between 12 and 18, the Palestinian Prisoners Society said in a statement on the occasion of the UN Universal Child's Day. 12 females are among the jailed children. According to the NGO, more than 2,000 Palestinian kids have been detained by Israeli forces since 2015. Israel has committed several violations against Palestinian children, including firing live ammunition against them and detaining them without food and water, in addition to beating and intimidation in order to gain confession. Smooth move, IDF. It is said that some Palestinian children were slapped with life sentences by Israeli courts, while others sentenced to 10 years in prison. The NGO went on to call international organizations, particularly UNICEF, to intervene to protect Palestinian children in Israeli prisons. And this torture of these kids done by the IDF prison system with impunity is an horrific breach of human rights of these kids. And I hope that various of the independent media will continue to shine a blinking light on these practices and get them to stop.
well, we'll shine the light on the practices, but Israel's not going to stop because they feel this is what is in their best interest to do. Sorry about that. It's very windy and a lot of dust in the air. Apparently, the Education Association is already having kittens over Trump's appointment of Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education, given that Betsy is staunchly opposed to Common Core and all the damage it's done to our education system. So, go get him, Betsy. And as you know, Donald Trump came out with this very interesting requirement that anybody joining his administration or transition team had to terminate any relationships they had with lobbying companies and would be banned from lobbying 5 years after leaving the Trump White House. As a result, all of the lobbyists are leaving his transition team. His staff has literally been cut in half, going from 250 to 125 staffers as the lobbyists head on out there and say, well, I'm here to make money, and you're taking away the payoff, which is being a lobbyist after slaving away in the Trump White House here. So we're coming up here on the end of the show, and again, Claire and I would like to extend to all of you a happy Thanksgiving, peaceful, calm. I wouldn't talk about the elections at the Thanksgiving table for reasons I've already detailed.
Yes.
And obviously traffic safety, especially in those parts of the country which are seeing an early, hard snow come on in. We're already hearing about massive traffic jams and gridlock taking place. So please be very careful. And just celebrate the time to be with your family. Think about all the things you do have to be thankful for. I'm thankful for her.
I'm thankful for him.
And I'm thankful that so far we've managed to prevent Hillary from stealing the White House and our nation. There's the music. Time for us to get out of here. We will be back live next Monday here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Have a great holiday. Aloha, America.